Hi guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sola and I'm that doctor that sews. If you're a returning subscriber, you are welcome. So I got a lot of requests from last week saying I should show how the corset was sewn together, and that's what I'll be doing in this video. These are the materials that I would be using in sewing this corset. This right here is the interfacing. In local markets it is known as BFF. This is the fabric that I'll be using to make the corset. I could choose to use this black wool fabric or this navy blue one, but for this video I'll be making use of the black wool fabric. This right here is known as cotton lining, and I'll be using it to line the inside of the corset. This here are the bonings. This is known as rigidine boning, and it's the type that you can sew onto the corset directly, while this is known as plastic boning. This can't be sewn onto the corset, you have to create boning channels for it. For this video I'll be making use of the plastic boning, that is this one. This is a matching bias tape which I would be using in creating the channels for the plastic boning. I'll also be needing the pattern master, a matching zipper, and the type of zipper I like to use for this particular corset is the type that opens up right here at the end, and this just helps to ease the wearing of the corset. I'll also be needing a pair of scissors, some matching thread, tape measure, some pins, and also tailor's chalk or a disappearing pen. Let's jump right into the cutting of the fabric. Here are the different pieces of the pattern. For each one of them I have cut out 2 pieces for the main fabric, 2 pieces for the interfacing, and 2 pieces for the lining fabric. I did this to each piece of the pattern, 2 pieces of the interfacing, 2 pieces of the lining, and 2 pieces of the main fabric. When I was cutting, I added a 0.5 inch sewing allowance to the sides of each pattern piece. So remember that this first pattern is on fold, so there's no sewing allowance at the center front. To join piece 1 with piece 2, I added a sewing allowance of 0.5 inches to those 2 sides. To join pattern pieces 2 and 3, I also added a 0.5 inch sewing allowance to the points that I'll join. To join pattern 3 and 4, I did the same thing. For patterns 4 and 5, there's already a 1.5 inch sewing allowance at the side, so I didn't add a sewing allowance to the sides for pattern 4 and pattern 5. Then to join pattern 5 and 6, I also added a 0.5 inch sewing allowance. To join pattern 6 and 7, I added a 0.5 inch sewing allowance. Then I also added a 0.5 inch sewing allowance to the upper parts of each of the pattern, and this is to give an allowance for when I'm going to join the main fabric to the lining fabric. So that's the point I'm going to join them. Then at the lower ends of the pattern, I added a 1 inch sewing allowance, and this is because I'm going to be joining the main fabric to the lining at the bottom as well, and I want the main fabric to overlap the lining at this lower edge so that the edges of the lining don't show. So that's the reason for adding this 1 inch allowance. Now note that this 1 inch allowance was only added to the main fabric. For the lining, I did not add the 1 inch sewing allowance, so that means that as of now the lining is 1 inch shorter than the main fabric. So we are going to be taking the patterns to the ironing board now, and then attaching or ironing on the interfacing to the main fabric. I have ironed the interfacing onto the wrong side of the main fabric on each of the pattern pieces, and so I will just be joining them with pins, and then I will take them to the sewing machine and join them with a straight stitch using a 0.5-inch sewing allowance. I'll be doing the same thing to the lining, and I'll be joining the different pieces together with pins and then sewing them on the sewing machine. These are the pieces of the back pattern, and I have also ironed on the interfacing on the wrong side of the main fabric for each of the pieces. So what I'm going to do now, just like I did to the front pieces, I'm going to join them together with pins, take them to the sewing machine and sew them together with a sewing allowance of 0.5 inches. I have sewn on the different pieces of the front, and this is how it looks on the wrong side. I'm going to open up the seams and press it with an iron. Then when I'm done, I'm going to trim out the excess sewing allowances so that the inside can be neat. This is the lining of the front panel. This is the right side and this is the wrong side. So I'm going to also iron the inner seams flat, and then I'm going to trim out the excess sewing allowances. These are the two pieces of the back panel, and I have joined the different pieces together, and this is how the wrong side looks. So I'm going to take it to my ironing board, open up the seams this way and iron it flat. And this is the lining for the two pieces of the back, and I'm also going to iron it out and trim out the excess sewing allowances. I have ironed out the seams. This is how it looks on the inside. Next thing I will be doing is sewing on bias binding. This is the matching bias binding. I'm just going to place that onto that way, and I'm going to sew it on top like that. So I'm going to do that for each of the 6 style lines on the front. These are the back pieces. The seams have also been ironed out flat. I'm going to be doing the same thing to the back pieces. I'm going to take the matching bias binding and sew it right on top of each of those style lines. I have sewn on the bias for both the front piece and the 2 back pieces. So what I would be doing right now is taking the lining of the front and back pieces and then attaching them along the neckline and along the armhole, and then sewing them together. I'm going to stitch it down with a 0.5-inch sewing allowance. I have joined the lining to the main fabric at the neckline, and I also made a stitch on the lining in order for it to stay in place so that the lining doesn't come outside and start showing. I did the same thing for the back piece here. Now, I didn't join the neckline and the armhole like immediately. I first of all joined the neckline and then I ironed it out so that in case there's an excess of the lining, I would be able to trim it out and it won't give me issues when I'm done sewing. So I've done that for the front piece and one of the back pieces. This is second back piece and I haven't ironed it out. I haven't trimmed out the excess. I'm going to trim this excess sewing allowance off so that by the time I turn it to the correct side and I iron it, the neckline area will not bulge due to excess fabric. So I'm taking my scissors and I'm going to trim out this excess sewing allowance. I have cut out the excess seam allowance, as you can see. Now I'm going to turn it to the right side and press it down and then show you what I mean by having excess lining at the edge. I have ironed out the neckline and this is what we have. Now as you can see along the armhole line, there's an excess of the lining fabric. So if I didn't go through this step and iron it out in order to check whether there was an excess, I would have just joined the armhole of the lining to the armhole of the main fabric, not knowing that the lining is in excess. And so definitely by the time I join the main fabric and the lining together at the armhole and I iron it out, I'll be seeing excess of the lining come out this way. So that is why I usually go through this step. So now I'm just going to trim out the excess lining I have here so that it could look like this. I'm taking my lining and the main fabric with the right sides together. I'm going to pin along the armhole and then sew it with a 0.5 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to do that to the second part of the back as well. And then for the front piece, we can also see that there is a disparity at the armhole between the main fabric and the lining. So I'm also going to trim out this area and then turn right sides facing each other and sew along the armhole line with a 0.5 inch sewing allowance. I have joined the lining and the main fabric at the armhole for the front piece and both of the back pieces. I'll be joining the front and the back pieces at the shoulder. I don't want the seam of the joining at the shoulder line to show on the outside. In order to prevent the sewing allowance at the shoulder joining from showing, I'm going to be inserting the front strap into the back strap. So with the right sides facing each other, I'm inserting the front strap into the back strap like that, and I'm going to just secure that with a pin so that it doesn't remove. Then the next thing I will be doing is attempting to turn the back piece inside out like this. I'm just going to carefully bring out the strap and also ensure that I bring the front strap through it as well. Thanks to the pin used in holding the straps together, the front strap is still attached and I was able to pull the front strap through the back strap. So now we have the back strap on the outside and the front strap inside the back strap. Before I join it together, I need to ensure that the right side of the back strap is facing the right side of the front strap. Once I've confirmed that, I'll make sure to align the edges and then I'll pin it down. I'm pinning it down right there. And I'll confirm that the edges are aligned right on the other side as well. that, then I'll pin it, and then once I pin it, next thing I'll just do is I'll just sew with 0.5 inch sewing allowance right there. After joining the straps together, I would be inserting the boning into these different boning channels, and before inserting the boning, I'm going to iron the boning out so that it can be flat and it won't give some unnecessary curves after inserting. I have joined the straps together at the shoulder, and I've also inserted the boning into the channels. The next thing I will be doing is closing up this lower edge of the corset top. So I'm going to be doing this for each one of the pieces. I'm going to turn, as it is like this, I'm going to just bring the lining over it, and then pin that together. I'm pinning it together at the edges, at the lower edge, and I'm going to sew it with a 0.5 inch seam allowance. So that's that for the back, and then I'll be repeating this on the front panel. You might have a bit of difficulty doing this because of the boning. Just be patient while doing it. I like to start from the pointy area at the center, that basque waistline area, and then gradually pin towards the sides. I have joined the lining to the main fabric at the lower edge of each piece, so I'm going to trim the seam allowance a bit, turn it inside out and iron the edges, and then I would bring it back and show you the outcome. I have joined the lower ends of the corset together and I have ironed it out, and this is what we have. Now I'm going to be joining the sides of the corset together using the inseam method. So I'm just going to join the sides together using the seam allowance I got initially of 1.5. If you're not sure of the measurements you have on the corset at this point, you can always measure and then calculate how much allowance you actually need to take out. When I'm done, I'm going to sew on my zipper, and then we're basically done with the corset. I joined the front and the back pieces at the sides with an inseam method, meaning that the seam allowance is not showing on the inside of the corset. Then I attached my zip and I used an overlocking machine to seal the edges to prevent it from fraying. And so we are done with the corset, and this is the outcome. This is the outside of the corset, this is the inside of the corset. Now this right here is the first corset I made, and there is a noticeable difference between the two. This one seems to have more folds on the bust as compared to this one. The major difference in the technique I used in making the two corsets is that for this one, the interfacing I used is BFF and it is lighter, while for the navy blue one, I used an interfacing called hairstay and it is not so thick, but it's thicker than the BFF interfacing. My advice is that if you are going for something neater that would have less wrinkles or folds on the surface, it's better you go for the hairstay interfacing. The only downside to using the hairstay interfacing is that it is expensive. The cotton type of hairstay goes for about 800 naira per yard. If you don't really care about the wrinkles, maybe you're just trying it out for the very first time, you could always use the BFF interfacing, and it is way cheaper, so you could use it to practice as much as possible. The BFF interfacing costs about 150 or 160 naira per yard. That's 5 times less than the cost of the hairstay interfacing. I will put this on and I will show the final results. If this video has been useful to you, kindly give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching. Till next time, bye.